And you're welcome along. Slight Tangent is coming at you. Very happy to say. We have Mick here. Hello, Mick.
Hello, Joe.
Arthur here. Hello, Arthur.
Joe.
Hello, Arthur.
Will here. Hello, Will.
All right, lads, you keep them on.
I will.
Very well. So much to discuss. I'll start with some emails, which is now how we're going to start because we are getting the emails. This is very exciting news. It only took Mick a month to sort out the junk situation, but here we are.
Here we are. Emails coming through.
A slight tangent at offtheball.com. Hi, Joe and team. He doesn't say.
Just hi, Joe. Well, Joe, you took it upon yourself to start sending people emails from that account, so
I do reply to people on it.
yeah, people know it's you. You're leading this.
Big fan of the show. A question for you guys. This is a doozy to start with. Maybe the wrong one to start with. A question for you guys. What sport would it be easiest to become world class at? That is competing regularly at the highest level in that sport. The criteria: you have to start said sport as a 5-year-old. You have to have realistic access to decent facilities for that sport. And he said the sport has to be something that if a world championship was won, it would be reported on RTE 6-1. So as in, not tiddlywinks. So he suggests rallying as the best.
That's
You're
an
starting that at
interesting
5.
call.
Irresponsible.
Do you know what? I immediately thought he had a good point, and then Arthur's put him down. It's like ridiculous.
You could be karting. I'm only half joking. You could be karting.
We talked briefly about this before coming on there. It's quite hard to pick anything you would say with any confidence. I think the odds are still right against you.
Big time.
Almost null. 0.01%.
But some are easier than others.
Yeah.
So everybody goes out kicking a ball at all kinds of age. So you do want to pick something that isn't as competitive,
As
that
deep.
isn't. But actually, some things are more technical and harder to master than football, maybe, and that's the reason football is so popular. So I don't think it's literally a case of numbers only. As the first one that comes to mind for me is snooker. So the main issue here is that snooker is not that widely played a sport for the amount of media coverage and interest that there is in it.
We should
in this
say,
part of the world.
Yeah, I was just thinking, because it's gone massive, hasn't it?
Sure, but what would be, you can win a world championship beyond 6-1. Oh, sorry, and look, I mean, absolutely, in
just
like
China
some parts of the Far East, and China in particular, it is getting big, but
That's only 1 billion people, you're right, go on.
Yeah, but I don't think there's 1 billion people in China playing snooker.
Bloody big into it.
Yeah, no, they are, absolutely, but I don't think it's quite on the level of, like, you could say cricket and you're saying, right, wow, 1 billion people in India are either playing cricket or nearly obsessed with it, I don't think it's on that level in China quite yet. But
Snooker
yeah, I would say snooker, it's a very kind of UK, Ireland based game. It's not easy to win a world title in it. I'm not undermining anyone who ever has. Yeah. And also you have to beat Ronnie O'Sullivan to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be the one I would choose.
Ken Doherty's on the line, he just phoned in there.
Another thing, Ken, if you're listening, you've about 30 years to do it. It's a long career to win that world championship.
Yeah.
Whereas in some sports you could be done by 31.
Anything that you would set your beloved at 5 years of age on?
Well, I don't know if you see, that's the difference between we're actually trying to find something that is incredibly achievable. So darts and snooker were two that jumped straight to mind.
Darts.
Skiing was another one that jumped to mind.
Skiing?
Slightly different.
You want to kill them?
Yeah, but look, again, the field is a little bit narrow. I think it has to be individual. If we're going to set the terms here, it's very difficult in team because you're so reliant on the team that you get on winning a world championship. And generally, with quite a few team sports, you're talking about probably a wider field to try and get into the world-class territory as well. I know world-class is incredibly arbitrary here, but...
Rugby sevens. Sorry.
See, I disagree with that. Because I was talking to...
I just interrupted Will.
Yeah, go on, sorry, no, jump in.
That was my fault.
Skiing.
Yeah, I know somebody who tried to do skiing at a later age, not 5 like we were starting off here, and you've got access maybe to more season you have here in Ireland. But I know someone who was a very good skier and was skiing out in Europe and would typically, compete a little bit, but not competing at a world-class level. He gave himself basically 2 Olympic cycles to try and qualify to compete at the Olympics and was unable to do so.
Yeah.
On the face of it seemed doable because the Winter Olympics has got a much smaller field than, say, the Summer Olympics. You're going for a country where if you get to a good level, there's a very good chance you'll be supported to be able to go. And he wasn't quite able to get there, even though he was already a very good athlete.
Okay. Arthur, you want to throw anything in there that we're overlooking?
Well, like, what I'm interested in is not easy. The situation I find very interesting, their own, right? Only by virtue of the fact that, right, so why are there such a number of high achieving rowers in Skibbereen? So it's like more often it's going to be to do with, I suppose, circumstance and where you are and what's the facilities there for you. So that doesn't make it easier, but there's obviously something in there that, like, all these guys weren't born, and athletes weren't born like genetic freaks.
Yes.
It is a nurture as well as nature.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, like, I don't know where that would be replicated.
You're saying there might be something in the water.
I wonder about the rowing though. Does that
Sorry.
does the rowing mean that, like, see, rowing is a very competitive sport. It's very wide range in terms of the amount of countries that compete in it. I wonder, is that the case anywhere? You know, if you have that perfect setup as they look like they have in Skibbereen, followed by the success that breeds more success and breeds more participation and everything else, is that something that can be just achieved with anything? It doesn't necessarily mean that rowing is an easy one to break through into.
It's funny. So
I'm not sure.
I think you're right. Yeah,
Damon Delaney, we play golf occasionally, and we were chatting one day afterwards.
Drop that in there.
No. It's because it's quite interesting. So we were chatting akin to this. We were wondering, because he's deeply obsessed with golf now, and he's obviously reached an incredibly high level in football. And we were discussing, well, is it harder to make it as a footballer or a golfer? And initially, I think he was leaning towards harder to be a golfer. And I sort of accept what he's saying. Like, I don't think any 5-year-old starting golf now has much of a chance of making it, because the talent pool is insane and so deep. But I was making the argument back. There are certain sports that you just have to be genetically gifted at to have any kind of a chance. So, for instance, these days, footballers just have to be able to run 13, 14 kilometres 3 times a week. They have to have certain speed. They have to have certain size. Whereas a golfer, regardless of what 5-year-old you're handing over to me, they could get to a really, really, really good level of golf if they practice
10,000 hours.
Did their 10,000 hours. And also because you're pulling the trigger. It's not a reactive sport. You can replicate, like darts. I thought darts is a good shout, and snooker. You can replicate the action and practice it you can be very moulded. Your talent level isn't as essential as it might be playing football.
Your physical talent level. Well, rowing definitely doesn't fall into that. Like, rowing is a lung capacity probably as much as any other sport in the world.
But then rowing's an interesting shout, because I do think there probably is, with ferocious work, you could get to a really, really high level. But then, probably there is that point where your lung capacity just rules you out.
There's a harness, you could probably harness it to a few different things.
Yeah.
Can I ask, though, just with the golf situation, but if that question is world class, I mean, how many...
Top 50?
You win the major, WGC probably.
So Seamus Power world class?
Yeah. Doesn't mean he's going to win a major. But I think if you're in the top 50, you're world class.
But for how long do you have to be there? Just to break into it?
I think if we got a 5-year-old and got him or her into the top 50, we'd have done a good job, even for a minute.
I think
the odds are still against.
If a 5-year-old gets to go and play a major, they've probably reached world class.
Oh, major, I think. Yeah. Will I press on?
On Sevens' point, I was just thinking...
Sevens is a perfect...
It's your specific example.
You would need lightning speed.
You were Jordan Conroy on the show last year, ahead of going to the Olympics.
Yeah.
And you spoke to him. He didn't touch a rugby ball until he was 18.
Yeah.
But you could argue that he already had athletic abilities which allowed him to have transferable skills that for your 5-year-old might not be athletic.
If you give me a 5-year-old who has no athleticism and can't sprint super fast, not playing sevens.
Do you know, though, can I just go back to the specific, you're arguing a very specific point there that's fair, but the actual question was, what's the easiest sport to go and win a world title in? Like, if you're going to go and win a world title, then you probably have a lot of, it's like, I'm not going to win a world title no matter what I pick up at 5.
No.
But, there's a chance that this person that's like, as in, what's easiest? You're putting all your athletes into this bracket as well.
Yeah.
And then you're looking for a sport that isn't possibly the most competitive in terms of the amount of countries that play it, the amount of people that participate in those countries.
Like, I think
that's why I think rugby would fit in.
To Sean, if we were to take his point very seriously, we'd have to reply to the email and say, "Hi, Sean, thanks for the email. We need to see the 5-year-old in a series of tests before we can really get serious about this."
There's a reality TV show.
How fast is the 5-year-old, Sean? Let's push on. We are going to get to topics pre-planned, but some other emails. Well, lads, absolutely love the new slot. I haven't missed an episode yet. I love hearing the debates on all topics, says Owen in Dublin. With Arsenal now top at Christmas, do you rate them as proper title challengers? I asked this because you were so dismissive of them a couple of weeks back. With City dropping points last weekend, are Arsenal going to be able to stick it out to the business end? I think with each passing week, we're cautiously more optimistic that they will hang around but ultimately I still think City are odds-on favourites. City will have a point in the season where they'll churn out 3 points, 3 points, 3 points, 3 points, and they'll handle Champions League duty as well. Arsenal, I dare say, won't.
I regret being as dismissive as we were.
Same.
I'm willing to roll back that far.
Yeah.
Very impressive where they've got to at this point.
Very likeable team.
Very likeable. Play some good football.
Story of the season. All joking aside, like I said that messing almost a couple of weeks ago, but I watched them against Wolves. I loved it. And I love seeing them go another week, and make this a real conversation.
Yeah.
I just don't believe that Man City aren't going to win the league easily. That's just what I think.
Yeah.
It's not a personal disrespect to Arsenal or a dig at them. I'd love to see them win the league.
And also
it doesn't matter what we predict.
Top at Christmas is not really top at Christmas anymore. It's top after 13 games.
Yeah, in this case, obviously, we're 4 games shorter than we usually have the profile by the time they kick off on St.
4 or
Stephen's
5,
Day.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, they've played about 14 games, I think, so far. And Arsenal have been top of Christmas 5 times and not won the league, as Arsenal fans will be quick to remind you themselves. And also, they still have to play Man City twice with the way the fixtures have fallen. Okay. Now, that could be a good or a bad thing. It's the fact there's 6 points available, but it still means that there's 2 games there. Liverpool fans will point out they made a title race out of it last year when they were 15 points behind around about this stage of the season too. So it's difficult to draw conclusions and say Arsenal are the Christmas champions because of the World Cup.
You can say anything looking back on other years, though. There's plenty of years when City were nowhere at this stage. And won the league or finished with 95 points, or that they go on those runs that Joe's talking about. It just so happened last year they did it the other way,
Yeah. One last email then, a follow-up point from last week. Hi lads, a previous listener wrote in about the use of knee slide celebrations in football. I was glad to hear this discussed.
2 of them.
I was glad to hear this discussed, as it's been a huge bugbear of mine for years. The issue is twofold. 1, overuse. It seems like almost every goal is followed by an attempted knee slide these days. It's been overdone to the point it's lost all meaning. I mean, what the previous meaning was isn't stated in the email. But I'll push on. I love this mail, by the way. I think it's written with a wry smile. Let's be fair to Emmett in Dublin. 2, inappropriate use, e.g. scoring a scruffy goal deflected off your hip from 2 yards out when your team's already 4-0 up. Inappropriate use. Now, I agree at that point.
I want to see an example of that happening, but yeah, fair enough.
I believe the reason for this oversaturation of the knee slide is caused by the increasingly smooth, wet pitches that are now standard across the game.
Disgraceful.
And also how players are increasingly image conscious. We talked about that last week. I did the Mbappe celebration. Won't do it again just now.
No.
So they adopt the knee slide, given how cool it looks when done well, e.g. Thierry Henry, as you mentioned on the show. The knee slide is the best and most satisfying goal celebration when it's used properly for a goal of high quality or importance. Ideally,
scroll here halfway through this email.
I'm getting repetitive injury syndrome here. Ideally, a thumping strike from long range, and it should be done rarely. The perfect example being John Enrise's Thunder Bastard against Manchester United at Anfield. Keep up the good work, and many thanks for highlighting these important issues, Emmett in Dublin.
Jersey over his head, I think, for that knee slide there. That's that's an extra knee slide.
He had the abs. We all went, oh, Jesus, when we saw that. And then he sends a follow-up email. I presume this is having watched the weekend's football. Out of the 29 goals in the Premier League, there were 9 knee slide celebrations. Rodrigo, Odegaard, Willock, Tavernier, Anthony, Maddison, Gibbs-White, Garnacho, McAllister. That's 31% of all goals followed by a knee slide. Far too many for my liking. Emmett Dublin.
That's some incredible research.
Take a bow. We don't need to, we can't. What can we add to
Surely
that?
Garnacho at the weekend though meets his exact criteria. So it's a late winner from a teenager who scored a really good goal to get a team 3 points. Knee slide away.
I also liked Odegaard because it had a certain panache.
I liked Odegaard but it also made me think a slight tangent is having too much impact on my life when he scored the goal. And then I went, oh, he's done a knee slide.
I thought the same thing. I really did. Okay, we'll push on. Somebody asked me why we didn't call this slot OTB Raw. Would we have liked that?
That was one of the suggestions early on.
Someone else said it to me during the week. Well, a fellow journalist.
It's a bit of a visceral image, isn't it?
It's a bit visceral.
Is it raw? I suppose it is.
The logic was
I mean, it's definitely cut, because I'll tell you that for free. Raw and cut.
He also suggested OTB Unplugged, as in it's just us in relaxed fashion talking nonsense. But anyway, let's...
Sure, it's a slight tangent now. We won't worry too much about it. We've done enough on the name.
Yes. So, some topics we want to talk about.
It was a slight tangent, by the way.
It was. Thank you for your emails. See what fun the emails are?
I appreciate the effort.
Now that you've opened
the
them,
last one, the effort in the last one is great.
The last email was...
It's more research than we do in a week.
Yeah, that is the best email we've received thus far in the long storied history. So, first topic for discussion, Ronaldo. Don't turn away for a second. I suppose what's very interesting about the Ronaldo saga, Arthur, is the extent to which it's both so tiresome and so compelling at the same time. That is the amazing high wire act it's currently walking. Like, we don't need to talk about Ronaldo has ended his career at United or analyse this any further. We've done that on the show. But just as a media global saga,
yeah,
so tiresome and yet so everywhere.
For sure. I was it on Sunday night the first thing started coming out from it? Yeah, sorry, after United Fulham. And I remember getting a text and someone sending me a link to the Twitter, that clip that was out, whatever one was out, and it was immediately that feeling. Straight away. My first time coming aware of it. And you're kind of like, oh God.
Yeah.
Oh God, that is an incendiary comment. Because it's at the base of it, like, it's probably the most recognisable footballer on the planet. I'd say even more so than Messi. I don't know if the numbers have stacked it up, but probably the most recognisable. Speaking, that's Cristiano Ronaldo raw.
Yeah.
And it's like, I wonder if it had happened 10, 15, 20 years ago, would it be a bigger deal? Because I think it's slightly, it seems like slightly underwhelming. It's like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But it's on the face of it, it is crazy.
I'm very underwhelmed by it, and I'm not sure why.
But it's mad, like. I don't know if you saw the stuff, like when you look back at the Figo documentary from during the year, and there was all that stuff when he was moving, I think, from Barca to Real Madrid, and there'd be little snippets in the paper, and it's like these little insights into this thing, and this is so big, and but like the equivalent to what Ronaldo's done, it's just
the Keane departure feels far more interesting and seismic to me. I'm sure there's an Irish aspect there, but I think it's just Ronaldo is so obviously marginal anyway that there's no great change in the Manchester United world.
Piers Morgan is a good hype man. He has done a pretty good job here of selling a 2-night documentary which is going to go out on Talk TV, and probably most people pick it up online as opposed to watching it live on one of the channels in the 500s on Sky on Wednesday and Thursday night. To even be able to spread the interview out over 2 nights and to build the hype in the way he has is quite impressive in and of himself, in that he has been essentially a hype machine for Cristiano Ronaldo. Anyone who's been following Piers Morgan's tweets for the last 2 days, he's been more like an advocate for Cristiano as opposed to somebody who has conducted an interview in this case. Like, to Arthur's point, I think if this happened 10, 15 years ago and Cristiano Ronaldo decided he was going to have a sit-down, it would have been on terrestrial TV, and it would have probably went out on a Sunday night and would have had millions of viewers. In this case, it's going to be millions of viewers online because of the worldwide appeal of social media. But I give Morgan credit and Ronaldo credit. The clips that I've seen so far, I probably will sit down on Wednesday and Thursday night and watch this, even though I wonder if there's more to it than the very, very incendiary comments that we've seen so far about Rooney and about Neville, and a lot of leading questions that have been given, particularly by Piers Morgan.
The most leading questions I've ever heard.
Would you say Rooney's jealous?
But can there be much more to it? Like, he's had a go at the club, he's had a go at Ten Hag, he's had a go at the two of them.
I don't think
can there really be more gold actually to be mined in?
No, I think it'll be a real letdown.
There's some normality in there.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in any of that stuff. Sorry.
That's good.
I'm not interested in any of the stuff we're talking. I'm not interested in whether Piers Morgan. No, sorry, I don't mean that. I'm not interested in whether Piers Morgan did a good job or not. I'm not interested in whether it would have been on the formats or anything like that, because it's just it is this seismic, massive event that the most famous footballer in the world has gone and done a tell-all interview with. Like, it's Frost Nixon for football, you know what I mean? And it's like, with this famous interviewer while still employed by this club. It's huge, but the world has changed so much that we will have moved on in 2 or 3 days. And by the time Portugal played their first game, this interview is barely a footnote in Ronaldo's career. That's what interests me. It's to Archer's point almost, is how much the world has moved on, that there's nothing that's ever going to be the biggest thing that ever happened again. You know, and that's what fascinates me more. That and what we've already talked about, which is I can't get my head around the conceit. I can't get my head around how somebody can logically, no matter what fame they've encountered, no matter what the 20 odd years of like hyper fame and adulation that Ronaldo has been faced with, I still can't get my head around the fact that he can't see the reality in front of him and he thinks that this is normal.
I can't get over one piece of hypocrisy that Ronaldo can't notice about himself. So he made a very reasonable point about the fact that Manchester United, particularly in the post-Alex Ferguson era, have been far too interested in the commercial side of the business at the expense of the football, without realising that his transfer 2 seasons ago was exactly for commercial reasons as opposed to for football reasons. That seemed to totally bypass him in the clip that I saw. Maybe there's more to it. We haven't seen it all yet. But I thought that was quite interesting that he didn't have the self-awareness to realise that 36-year-old Ronaldo was being brought back primarily to sell shirts.
Yeah.
And to keep him away from City, obviously.
I suspect what will be most frustrating in this interview is the extent to which Piers Morgan will give him free rein to make all sorts of points.
And actively encourage him to do so.
Picking up any contradictions or challenging anything. And Morgan's capable of doing that. I mean, the other week he interviewed Kanye West, and honestly, it was very combative and engaging, also odd in many respects, but engaging as a result. Whereas I dare say, he won't say to Ronaldo at any point, but hang on, Cristiano, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, and that's not the way TV interviews should be conducting it. That's he should be a journalist. He says he's a journalist. He's not, you know.
Like, I want him saying,
did Manchester United get a right reply when he said that they didn't believe him about a sick kid?
No.
When I don't know what was going on behind the scenes, but every news report at the time, as thousands and thousands of people have pointed out since, said that Ronaldo was off for family reasons. I didn't hear United say. United defended him and really tried to move the conversation away from Ronaldo transfer during that time when he was off. All the evidence that we have suggests that they took that very seriously.
They didn't get a right reply because they didn't know the interview was happening until after the Fulham game.
You know what I mean, though? That's not journalism.
And also, I do think you do want counterpoints like, well, is betrayal not walking out on the team at halftime and leaving the stadium? Those kind of points back, just to see what he has to say. This great model professional who isn't being challenged. But I dare say that'll be the tone, unfortunately.
It's not an interview.
It's
the reason he can challenge, I haven't watched the Kanye West one, but obviously I know the gist of what Kanye West is talking about.
Yeah.
The reason he has to challenge that is because he has no option but to.
Sure.
You can't not. Sure. You can't put it out there as is. Like, it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not serious. Like, it's just a vessel.
Yeah.
And
for clicks.
It is interesting how the vessels have changed, though. Like, Gerard Piqué did his eventual final interview last week, did it on Twitch with his mate, as opposed to doing it with TV.
Yeah.
And it suited him perfectly, because his mate comes on, lets him talk freely, he can chat whatever he wants, and therefore it's not going to go down certain angles. He's not going to be asked about his now ex-wife at this point in the breakdown of his marriage earlier this year.
I don't think they were married.
He can, or maybe they weren't, sorry, but, like, you know what I mean? They can just go out. No. I thought they got married.
No, they were never married.
All right, well, but basically he can go out and he can just shoot without having to listen to those type of questions.
Yeah.
And so he can go out in a very different way. And I suppose in Cristiano's case, he probably knew the type of interview he was going to get from Piers Morgan.
And actually, it's dressed up with this faux, I'm being interviewed by a serious journalist, I'm going to be cross-examined here, but it's not really.
Well, the clip we saw last night was like, I never heard anything as like, well, the example was
You're better looking than Rooney. No one could deny that.
Mr. Burns, your campaign is all the momentum of a runaway freight train. Why are you so popular?
Oh dear. Let's take a break. We have more topics we want to get to. Back in just one moment with a slight tangent. Now then, you're welcome back. So it is a slight tangent coming at you. Joe here, Will here, Mick here, Arthur here. This is the slot where Team OTB PM chat away for an hour, in effect. There's no other way to dress it up.
No.
Pretty much.
It's still on probation.
Resistance.
It's still on probation, this slot, but it's hanging in there just about. So we've talked about Ronaldo. We've gone through some of your emails. The England team photo, and I appreciate on radio, we can't show it to you right now, but you can find it very quickly.
Everyone
on
has a
your
phone. Google
Yes,
it if you're not
indeed.
driving.
And if you are driving, the gist of it is they've gone, I think akin to the Southgate approach, where they play darts with journalists and are a bit more relaxed and are trying to enjoy the whole experience. It's not as stiffly standing in suit and tie in typical team photo pose. It's all of them almost in more relaxed, do what you freestyle it. So you can smile, you can not smile. Quite a few of them have their Foden has his arm around somebody. Our two boys, Grealish and Rice,
best mates,
arm in arm.
never away from each other when it comes to England camp. Every time I look at them, the two of them are side by side.
Yeah.
Declan Rice tussling his hair in the photograph.
James
They could have
Maddison,
been friends for another country.
James Maddison already been likened to Ashley Cole, slightly on the periphery with too much space between him and the rest.
Do you think he's photoshopped in? Do you think he was like they had a 25-man thing a couple of weeks ago?
And I have to say, I think it looks really nice.
Nice.
I say that uncynically. I think there's something very nice about
Yeah,
it.
it looks natural, but it also kind of looks a bit like a sort of United Colours of Benetton photo shoot. Do you know what I mean? That kind of way. Like, it's that kind of thing you'd see it on the wall.
No way.
All the way. It's just a very, the nice strong colours and everything's kind of...
Models are sort of like laughing as they look at each other with nicely ruffled hair.
I want that, like, when we were starting talking about football sartorially, I'm still with that sort of Italy. Was it Armani? Was it, or Gucci? Whatever the suits the lads wore at the Euros.
Yeah.
And it was all very orchestra. It was all very clean. It was very cool. I think everything after that's just
very Italian.
Those little kind of like grey blue jackets.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, Mancini really. Mancini and Vialli is kind of how I see.
I thought there was a lovely sense of a group of mates having fun, and this is a World Cup, and let's enjoy it.
Yeah,
as opposed to,
it wasn't
oh my God,
stiff.
we're going to get slaughtered by the sun when we lose on penalties.
Yeah, it wasn't stiff. It looked like they were enjoying it. Now that's look, to be honest, it doesn't actually tell you that they're relaxed and happy. It's just a good photographer doing their job well.
Yeah.
But yes, I actually did like it as well.
They're still going to get slaughtered when they lose in penalties in the semi-final anyway.
Well,
but it is the mood that I think they are right to try and portray.
Big time. I think absolutely, and they should embrace that mood. Where are we on England?
In what way, Joe?
Well, in the way we always discuss these
Are
things.
we supporting England? Do we want them to win the World Cup?
I will go on record as saying I really like them as a team. And I like Southgate. I think he's a decent man.
But?
Well, I did find myself supporting, and I've always made any World Cup going back years, as long as I can remember. I can't remember. I remember 94 a little bit when they weren't there, but 98, like the England games were top of my priority list as a Manchester United supporter, and half the English team were United players. Right the way through to the Euros last year, I won't miss England play. I'm very interested in them for a variety of reasons. And I generally want them to do well. I've always been up for England in most matches. However, when they got to the Euros final last year, in the hour before, I was hit with a sudden, oh God, we won't hear the end of this from their media.
Was this because of Leicester Square? Or did that have anything to do with it? No, because it was there. You know, if you were talking about an hour before.
Yeah, there was an aspect of that as well. There was an aspect of that.
You know, IMRO Sports Story of the Year, carnage at Euro 2020. But that starts with like you being on air on the Sunday, reacting to what is going on here, and then when you go there at 8 o'clock, and this is a tangent to the conversation that we're having, like the chaos at Wembley, which again, it's like what I was saying about Ronaldo. Everything is forgotten about 10 minutes later. That was nuts. That match was hard to watch. I thought there was going to be something serious happen in the stands that night. Like, people were in the wrong seats, they were in the aisles, everything was chaotic.
Yeah.
And it was very hard to think all these things that these players represent and have done, that's for them. A World Cup or a European Championships, winning it is for your fans and your country. And most of the time England fans let them down and make me want them to win. And I think that's what it comes down to for me. I don't know if for you it was something more that you turned on it because it was a media, never hear the end of it. I think a lot of people say that, never hear the end of a thing. I think that's the case with everything. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we are exposed to their media, so I do understand it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I have a very specific thing on this that I actually wrote about it last summer. Sport is tribal, and it is fun. It is a good way to channel nationalism. It's a good way to channel tribalism. And for me, as a border country to England, who has incredible ties with them, like, on superficial and real levels all through our lives, they are the big country with the chance of winning the World Cup. We are the team that wants to qualify or beat England every now and then. There is literally nothing wrong with not wanting them to win football games. And we'll have the phone-in shows about maturity that will come up if they start going well in a couple of weeks, and how we all need to get over ourselves. Nobody's asking Scottish fans to support England. It's only Irish fans that need to get mature, right? And this whole thing is like, this is a likeable group of people. This is a team that has, like, Jordan Henderson reaching out to gay fans that don't feel like that they're included. This is Raheem Sterling taking on Fleet Street and all their nonsense. Marcus Rashford, food banks for the poor. Gareth Southgate doing an awful lot. I agree with you. Don't particularly like him myself, but I do. I do. In real life, yeah, I think he's a good guy, And plenty of them, all the way up and down the team. Really, really good group that I like personally.
Yeah.
I just don't want them to win a football match, because the real life stuff is impressive. the sport stuff is just sport.
Yeah.
And that's where I always stand with England. I've some of my best memories in sport are France Euro 2004, Portugal Euro 2004, Portugal in the 2006 World Cup,
Croatia
in that qualifying was such a fun night. I was actually in off the ball for that. You know, there's loads of things like that are just memories of football, and it's because the team you don't want to win didn't win. That's all it is. It's only a game.
It's not an anti-English.
It's not anti-English the country. It's anti-English the football team.
Yeah.
You know, that's where I stand on it. Anyway.
You need to go on Joe Duffy when that comes up in a few weeks. very convincing argument, I think.
Thank you, Joe.
Arthur.
No. What? Do I want them to win?
Yeah.
Nah.
Okay, sorry to disturb. Will.
It's just funnier. It's funnier when not. It's funnier when they don't. Do you know?
Yeah.
It is funnier.
They're sporting rivals. I make no value.
It's more enjoyable. Like everything's more enjoyable around it. The reaction, everything like that. Like,
the fallout is good. There's no doubt that it's the
Yeah.
best 2 or 3 days of every tournament when they get knocked out.
I was in a pub in Dublin. Sorry, Will, I don't try to get it. Just reminded me of that. Outside, and it was the time they lost to Portugal in the 04 Euros. And I was outside a few minutes later, and there was an old English guy who was near me when he was watching. Old, I say. He was old at the time when I was a young lad.
Probably 40.
Probably my age now, like, you know. And he was there, and he was just like, oh, I'm really sickened about that. And I was like, Jesus, they had a great tournament. And he was like, he goes, why was everybody in there cheering for Portugal? And he was said it in that tone. And I was like, well, because we want England to lose. And he's like, but we'd always want Ireland to win. And I was like, mate, it's only a game. Like, I was like, I'm talking to you about the match now in a very kind of like positive way about England. But I went in there 5 minutes ago. I'm cheering on Portugal like as if I'm like
Rui Costa.
I'm Eusebio's son. You know what I mean? It's like it's just lack of understanding as to why we would just pick the other team. But sure, of course we would. Anyway.
They're ultimately sporting rivalries. I enjoyed when Samoa beat England in the Rugby League semi-finals.
That was a great game, by the way.
It was a cracking game, and even funnier when England lost at the end of it. I would have probably enjoyed if England had lost the Cricket World Cup final at the weekend too. I make no apologies for one of our sporting rivals not wanting to do particularly well. Like, I don't like the idea of Eddie Jones and Farrell going up to lift the cup next year if they were to get to the Rugby World Cup final. I make no apologies for that. But the England football team is particularly entertaining because if you think back to the South Africa World Cup, remember Eamon Dunphy read out one of the English papers just before the tournament started, and it was basically a poem, I think it was in the Times, which was writing about the fact that, you know, God was looking down on England as they embark on their latest campaign to win the World Cup. That kind of nonsense rose most of us up the wrong way as well, and I have no problem enjoying their downfall.
Okay.
I think the media stuff is overblown. I didn't articulate that properly. What other country isn't supporting their team?
Fair point.
I do wonder about that. Now I know we're listening to it going, oh God, this is nonsense to me. But like, if Ireland were in, like, we do some of the most sycophantic shite that anyone will ever do when it comes to Ireland and things like. The media stuff is, I think it's actually how they attack, how they build them up to tear them down. That's the bigger issue with.
Yeah, that's very
now
interesting.
again, when it happens, is it funny for a few days until it gets serious? It's generally how it works, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like they go too far, and the stuff like, you know, post Euros final, and then suddenly you're seeing what Saka and
Sancho and a few others.
And who were, I can't even remember who we're all dealing with straight after, and you're like, oh, you know.
Yeah.
That takes away from my kind of enjoyment of this. It's a bit of crack, and you lost the football game.
Yeah.
You know, because
yeah, I do remember that after, was it 14? After one of the tournaments anyway, paper did like a sting on Raheem Sterling moving into new house. The poor fella has to move into his house.
Oh, it was even worse
just
than
because England lost.
no,
the thing was about the fact that he had bought his mother a new kitchen, as I recall, which felt even worse. This idea that a guy would look after his mum by, getting some stuff for her house.
But Sterling did that. That was his, like I said earlier, he take on Fleet Street. Like how he did that was so beautiful in that he took, I don't remember what young Man City player it was, but he put the side-by-side story of the exact same story. I think the other guy had spent more money, the white player, on for his mother, and it was beautifully presented as this generous guy, whereas Sterling's this
Flash dude,
this flash kid who shouldn't have any money.
Yeah, there was that for sure. This was another situation where it was just, how dare he do this 5 days after they're out of the World Cup.
They had a go at him for going out for breakfast, I think, at one point as well. I'm not sure if that was the same year, but Sterling had to face that too. It was basically like, how could he be showing his face in public after England's shame? I think that was after the Iceland game, though.
Potentially, yeah.
Guy went for breakfast.
So
I forgot to put Iceland in that list earlier, by the way.
Will mentioned it.
Chris Waddle's rant.
Yeah.
Very
Sorry, that is the best part of every tournament is Chris Waddle.
And his pain.
Ah,
I enjoy
they're
his
all
pain.
just headphones. One of his lines. So Luis Enrique is going to talk directly. This is the end of us, really. This is it. I mean, this is
Should
officially
just
it.
be talking to ourselves and 15 hours of a slight tangent a week.
Yeah. Luis Enrique, the Spanish coach, has bought a headset. I saw the screenshot of him. So he's got one of the headsets, and he's going to talk directly to the fans about the games. And the promise or the presumption is, in great detail, he'll be able to give them more instead of pesky journalists trying to stir it up with their questions off camera, off mic in a press conference, ruining it for everyone.
Yeah, and he had a bit of self-deprecation when he was in as well. He's like, my headset sounds like it's from the 3rd division, I think was how he described how bad it sounds. He was saying, look, the lighting's not perfect, my camera isn't great, I'm going to try and improve this closer to the World Cup. But the idea is that you will get literally an unfiltered view from me and my coaching team in a direct messaging to you, the fans, as opposed to it being interpreted by the media and then reported back, which is a totally different departure. And I wonder if at some point this is what more sporting people might do. Like we talked before the break about Cristiano Ronaldo going to Piers Morgan to very carefully manage the message, or Piqué doing it last week. In this case, Luis Enrique, depending on how much influence the Spanish Federation have on what he can say or how much detail he can go into. But in theory, this could be really interesting if Enrique is, say, answering questions from fans or speaking very directly about his decisions during a game or his feelings afterwards.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, I totally understand where sports people are coming from, where they go into press conferences and they must feel very uncontrolled, and any question could come about anything at any moment, and it must make you feel very nervous. And not everybody is Tyke Furlong, who's relaxed and hit me and I got nothing to hide. Yeah. So I think it could lend to the fans getting a lot more out of Luis Enrique. Obviously, the downfall is if there is a major controversy or something which does need to be brought up, or a failing which he can skirt by.
No stream today, kids.
No stream, or else just don't bring it up.
Talk about it. I think that's a much bigger issue. Like, I mean, as much as we can talk about more interesting stuff from them, the point of press conferences is to be held accountable for whatever, good or bad, and that's just not there. So all accountability is gone, and that's, you know,
because I could see how Stephen Kenny, for instance, would find this very appealing. Do you remember a year ago Stephen Kenny brought a bunch of journalists, I wasn't one of them, into the analysis room at the FAI headquarters and really gave them fantastically, almost off the record, detailed information about his tactics and his plans and his thinking. And I would say he would love to do that with the Irish public. I could see him really going for that. And I always think he's quite keen to do media, but the price he has to pay, and I asked him here as well, by the way, so you know, this is just the nature of the media. The price he has to pay to have the media platform is to be asked about what Brian Kerr said. It's a legitimate question, and it's interesting. Like it is, you know, everyone's interested. Oh, what's he going to say back? So that's the price he has to pay, and I can see how he must be torn at times between genuinely he really wants to give something back to the Irish football supporter, but then I go on air and I'm going to be asked about 4 or 5 things. They'll be the headlines, so I might just leave it. So I could see him looking at Luis Enrique this winter and thinking, do you know, I might do a bit of that. I get the board out and I show people what I'm thinking or how I see things. So
it's just that's not real. It's not real. Like it's a nice additional thing, but it shouldn't be a replacement.
That's a good point. Yeah.
An ancillary thing.
Yeah.
Like
Well, I presume Enrique will still be doing media throughout as well.
Well, you have to.
It's just his
It's
way
a contract.
Yeah.
But we're saying there's a slippery slope element to a presentation from a footballing body in the next 4 years to UEFA, where they say this should fulfil our obligations instead, and yada yada. You know, like, so I just, like, you also asked Stephen Kenny about going to the World Cup. He had a perfectly good answer to it, and I'm sure he would be happy to talk about it. But again, that's not something that he would probably want to bring up. But his representative, him being representative as Ireland manager, he needs to be asked those questions.
Probably, yeah.
And so, like, who's going to do that in this scenario? You know what I mean? It's like people have these, especially in national teams, my God, they're representing the country. They have important public roles that they need to be questioned on. The idea that they could just skirt over it so they can dock tactics.
The process of removing the middleman has already started to a certain
we're headed that
extent.
way. Like,
you know, we've already got some organisations who will send out an interview which is being conducted by the organisation or the federation, and it's sent out to the media to then relay it, as opposed to hosting press conferences, which is a very dangerous slope to go down.
The FAI tried it with which new manager?
Was it
or was it Martin O'Neill? There was some big issue, as there always is with the FAI and the appointing of managers. So, anyway, the details aren't that important, but there was, or like it was around the time the FAI was going into financial ruin as well, and it was whoever the manager was on FAI TV asked 2 quick questions, and that was it. No media inquiries, and it was like, you can play this or not play it, and that was unacceptable. But that is the route we're heading for sure.
Yeah, I even think, and look, again, I praised him at the time for it, maybe even on the slight tangent, but I was interested in Desi Farrell when we spoke about, Mannion coming back onto the panel, and it just kind of was part of the interview. See, I had to get about 5 minutes in, it was like, yeah, Paul Mannion's back. Yeah.
That's a good example. The Desi Farrell interview there, that's a good example of how the fan, and I think it's different in GA because they don't owe anybody anything, and we're talking about amateurs, and there might be questions or things going on behind the scenes that they don't want to talk about in any depth, but Desi wasn't pushed at all there because it's Dubs TV and he's so in control of the situation. Like, it would have been really interesting to know, did you approach them? Did they call you? Did they come as a pair? Did they, like, harmless enough, interesting content that journalists might fish around for a bit more. Whereas on Dubs Fan TV, it was just like, the 2 lads are back, we're delighted. Next question.
It fits into something we've talked about briefly with the GEA, in that, like, organisations kind of thinking of themselves as content providers. So GA actually said that in some of the stuff after the deal there recently, and talking about GA Go. The FAI, you mentioned that. I don't remember the manager interview, but I remember specifically.
Looked like a hostage.
I remember David McGoldrick won like Player of the Year, and it was right before he retired, and it was like, I think it was like Garrett Maher was doing the interviews, and this was, we've got this a few times, I think, from the FAI, where they're the ones providing the interviews for FAI TV, and then they're sent out to everybody else.
Well, actually, do you know the ultimate example? And this, I mean, head in your hand stuff. The rugby journalists were telling me that, and Shane McGrath wrote about it in the Mail, so I'm not betraying any confidence, that they were at an Irish press conference with Andy Farrell and whatever player was up, and it was in the same day that the 29 contracts were announced for the female players, and so it was on the same day, and they're all trooping out of the Andy Farrell press conference, and they can see literally 50 yards down the hallway some of the female players are being interviewed by Irish Rugby TV. And like, you've got literally all of the best rugby journalists in the country in the building, but you're doing your Irish Rugby TV interview down there. And it was purely because, I'm guessing, it's because they don't want the players asked questions about the remuneration, the terms of the contract, could more be done, etc. Yeah. And that is real.
But that's
true, dangerous territory. Stuff, just one last point. This is taxpayer funded. Yeah. Like, there is a point where, we're managing our brand, fine, but there is actually also a legitimate, the Irish taxpayers given 18 million quid over to the IRFU, and now you won't let them interview the team when you've got everybody right here. Yeah, I thought that they didn't get enough criticism for that. That's really poor.
100%, and you're everything you said there is right, but it's like, notice that we've talked about GA, FAI and IRFU, they're all doing it, this idea that they're the content generation, but what's missing in that is like, that will always be biased by nature. It will be incomplete coverage, content, whatever you want to call it, for the examples that you just laid out. So I think it's just something that we have to be wary about when the GA or whoever casually say we're in the content creation business now. Yeah. Because you're not, like, that isn't what this is supposed to be, and look, the NFL and NBA kind of do it in a way that the whole world seems to want to copy, and it's like, they're big and confident enough. You watch NFL Network, you'd be amazed at the way they talk about the teams and the coach. Like, you may as well be on one of the independent stations. It's well, now I'm sure there could be, more specific things that they don't get into. But from what I see, it looks normal. Yeah. But that's not ever going to be the case in Ireland.
Too small a country.
Or even in Europe, I would say. Like, you know what I mean? There isn't that kind of self-confidence in the product, I would say. We're always going to be protective. It's just natural human nature. So they shouldn't be doing it.
GA Go service will be interesting on that front next summer if they're critical around matches that they're showing.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see, again, I suppose it's a slight tangent, where they actually go with that potentially as a format to put out content further down the road. Will GA Go just become somewhere where the B and C class matches go out next year, or are they going to start creating their own programming? And if that happens, how much independence would there be, given that the GA already own part of GA Go along with RTE, who are another rights provider? That independence doesn't appear to be there. But again, let's wait and see what happens.
Yeah.
Well, they're hardly going to get on like Brolly and Spillane talking about how we've never seen a good game of football in 20 years. Be they right or wrong.
On Luis Enrique, as a final thought, are we sounding like bittered journalists fearful for our careers or no?
I want to see what he does. I'm interested. I mean, again,
Us
I think
giving out about the in-house production escalation.
Well, obviously we have a
skin in the game.
We're coming from somewhere on this. We know what we do.
Yeah.
And
we
think that's it, but we absolutely don't rely on it. But we think it's important, and we think journalism is important. That's our prerogative. I don't think it's embittered or anything like that. It comes from knowing what we do. Other people will listen to this and think that's not important, and I don't care, and you all twist everything they say anyway, and I'd rather hear it from their horse's mouth. That's a fine opinion, but I think ours is an informed opinion based on what we know, be it right or wrong, as opposed to being embittered. There's always that assumption that people are like have an agenda or something, you know.
I think I'm okay with Enrique doing it because Enrique's going to have to face the media anyways.
Yeah, it's a lovely balance.
It's an extra bit.
Yeah.
But if it was to become, say if Enrique was to say, I'm not going to speak to the media whatsoever at the World Cup, and you can only watch me on my own stream, which I've edited and put together, that's far more dangerous.
Yeah, or if like FIFA TV becomes the press conference. Any thoughts on this, Arthur? Final thoughts?
No, I think it's not for us. I think it's for whatever generation it's for, but it's pretty disillusioning. You see all the clubs doing it as well. All the Man United, Man City, everything. They're all creating their own stuff with their own in-house things, but it's just propaganda, really. It's not. There's no one's held accountable. No one will do anything. It'll just be. It's just that's all it is. It's just it's politics. It's the same thing. The exact same way parties will spin things, clubs will spin things. It's worthless.
Yeah,
I wonder about its overall success though, because like it's like again, and I'm
boring
bringing
content.
things back to Villa, but like when Gerrard was going through the mill, and
how are we talking about Steven Gerrard?
But I was watching these interviews. This is a very good example. We're watching these interviews after every game, where they're like, "Got unlucky today, Stephen." You know, and that's they're the 4 minutes that pop up in your timeline. By the way, it's not the match of the day interview, the Skyline. It's the official club one that pops up. That's what you see after a match, and it's divorced from reality.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, no matter what generation you are, and I agree with you, it's for a different generation. Who's it serving? Like nobody's buying it. Like you know,
well, they do. Like it must be doing something.
There's numbers.
Now, people watch it, but I don't know if they're anger watching or if they're actually enjoying it.
Click's a click.
Well, indeed.
What a grim world. What a grim way to end.
Please click the video.
Summed up our lives there. We are done. I know you want to talk about Amazon streaming. We're going to have to do that another week. The November series is still continuing.
Watch out, Bezos.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it because I can't find the second thing.
The RTE corner has been replaced by Amazon corner for you. Will, thank you. Mick, thank you. Arthur, thank you. That was a slight tangent where the OTB PM team sit around and chat about the stories of the week. You can email us a slighttangent@oftheball.com and we will talk to you in the next week or two.